What's up everybody, this is Master EN Gamer, and today I'm back with another new hero concept prediction, this time for the Vishkar official and Talon council member, Sanjay Korpal. Much like the Junker Queen, Sanjay has been one of the community's most anticipated new hero candidates, which is why today I want to analyze what exactly he might do as a hero in Overwatch, and whether or not he's a likely candidate for being Hero 29 specifically. To start, I just want to quickly run through everything we know regarding Sanjay as a character. He's had 3 visual appearances thus far, one being in Symmetra's A Better World comic, another at the end of Doomfist's Masquerade comic, and the final being in Moira's origin story video. Of these, he only actually speaks in the Symmetra comic, and is conveyed as being her superior within the Vishkar Corporation. How highly Sanjay himself stands within the company is unknown. However, it's reasonable to assume that he's fairly significant, as he seemed to be heading the negotiations with Rio de Janeiro's mayor. Outside of his involvement with Vishkar, his appearance in Moira's origin story as well as the Masquerade comic reveals that he also has ties to Talon, and in fact seems to be ranked quite highly there as well, given that he's sitting at the table with other inner council members. While it's unclear whether Vishkar as a whole, or merely Sanjay himself, is involved with Talon, it does tell us that he's someone with lots of connections. In fact, from a story standpoint, he's a crucial bridge connecting characters like Symmetra and Lucio to the main Overwatch storyline, and could easily open several doors when it comes to exploring the lore of both Vishkar and Talon. It's also worth noting that during the Sombra ARG, Sanjay was revealed as being in contact with the Lumerico's CEO regarding a currently unknown discussion. While there doesn't seem to be any significant details regarding his character revealed in it, it is another instance of him being mentioned within the Overwatch universe. Furthermore, while he's never mentioned by name, Sanjay does seem to be referenced by a couple of in-game voice interactions, most notably being this one, which was just added alongside the Halloween event.
What interesting things I've learned about your employers, Miss Vaswani.
What have you heard?
While voice lines aren't always indicative of new hero developments, it's still something to consider. Beyond what is immediately apparent from his appearances though, we can tell by his words and actions that he's likely some kind of pragmatist, focused on establishing order and success for Vishkar by any means necessary. Whether he seeks this out of a true desire to improve the world, or simply does it to empower himself, is unknown. But assuming it's the former, this would give him the interesting dynamic of essentially holding a radical version of Symmetra's philosophy. This would also make him more in tune with Doomfist, who performs evil actions not for his own power, but rather to try and improve humanity as a whole. However, Sanjay's true motivations likely won't be revealed until he's actually playable, so now let's dive into his possible mechanics as a hero in Overwatch. Once again, there's not a whole lot to go off of, but I think there are a couple key characteristics which will come into play. The first of these is Hard Light. Given that he's a member of Vishkar, it would only make sense that he has access to the same hard light technology as Symmetra. While it's unknown whether Sanjay himself is capable of bending hard light in the same way as her, it could at least still be implemented more subtly into his kit, like the hard light blades on Lucio's skates. However, if he is an architect like Symmetra, then that opens up a number of further possibilities, which I'll get into in just a minute. The second key characteristic is that Sanjay will more than likely be a tank. Given that we've already had a Vishkar hard light support and DPS in the various forms of Symmetra, and the support version of her didn't work out that well, it seems appropriate that the next hard light hero would be a tank. There's a lot of potential when it comes to hard light tanking mechanics, which is where we finally get into speculating what Sanjay's actual abilities may be. The first idea, that I'm far from the first to suggest, is that Sanjay will be able to build structures using hard light. Things like walls, ramps, and bridges to block off enemies, provide cover for his allies, as well as give them access to different areas on the map. Feel free to make all the Fortnite jokes you want, but we could see something like this implemented into Overwatch as well. However, despite how cool something like this sounds, I'm actually not a huge fan of this idea. Assuming his walls and such work similarly to Mei's, they unfortunately then would also inherit the trolling potential of Ice Wall as well. If Sanjay's hard light structures are bigger, stronger, and longer lasting than Mei's, that would make him only more effective at trapping trapping allies in spawn and annoying them to no end. Sadly, I think this aspect alone is enough to make simple wall building unviable. Perhaps the walls would only block enemy movement and fire, essentially making them more versatile versions of the barriers we already have in game. Maybe the same abilities like Fire Strike could still pass through them, but the big thing they hold over default barriers is that they could be used to effectively block certain routes, or even trap enemies in a confined area where the team can then focus them down. However, as you'd imagine, hard light walls like this wouldn't do a very good job of helping allies reach new locations if they only physically apply to the enemy, thus detracting a lot of the utility you might expect from creating hard light structures. Perhaps he'd have the ability to create jump pads, but even that seems like just an inferior version of Symmetra's teleporter. Overall, I really hate to say it, but I can't find a satisfying way in which a hard light builder would work when it comes to tanking and creating structures. The fact that builders in general have been notoriously weak in Overwatch also doesn't help this case, which makes me overall a bit skeptical of whether or not it would even work as a concept. But another gameplay mechanic I could see Sanjay using would be hard light shield health. Given his ties to Vishkar, I would not be surprised to see a portion of his health pool being shields. But when it comes to his abilities, applying bonus shield health to allies could be part of his kit. We know this mechanic works on a fundamental level, given that for a long time it was part of Symmetra's kit before her most recent rework. And despite it not working for her as a support or DPS, I think the tank category would be where an ability like this would actually shine. When you think about it, given that all supports have now become healers, a tank would be the logical hero to provide this kind of utility. As for how exactly it would work, one possibility is that it essentially be the same as Symmetra's old shield generator, except instead of being a structure which could be placed on the map, Sanjay himself would be the source of the shield distribution. If it's an activated ability, he might provide bonus shield health to all allies within a set radius of himself. Unlike the depleting shields provided by Lucio's ultimate, these regenerative shields would remain on allies as long as they stay within Sanjay's AoE until the ability ends or Sanjay dies. This would effectively give him a sort of indirect tanking element, as enemies would want to focus him first over his teammates, since eliminating him would remove the shields from everybody else. Now, I will admit that depending on the radius of this AoE and whether it requires line of sight or not, we could easily get another hide and seek meta, which I don't think anyone would want. However, I have one further idea about how exactly this ability could work. Rather than being an ability with a cooldown, his shield generator's uptime will be bound to a resource meter. Like Moira's healing spray, it depletes while active, slowly recharges while inactive, and substantially recharges when your shielded allies take damage. Hear me out. Whenever an ally under the protection of Sanjay's active shield generator takes damage, they will still lose that amount of health and shields, but it also charges Sanjay's shield generator, thus ultimately prolonging its uptime and strengthening his team. Even if the damaged ally ends up dying, Sanjay himself and the team as a whole are still strengthened by it, which actually fits quite well with what we know about his character. Jumping back to his story presence, he's no stranger from using people to further his own agenda and build a better world, even if the people he's using die as a result of it. While in-game he would of course want to avoid any ally fatalities, he still benefits, albeit to a lesser extent, if they die. This might make him sound like a bad tank, but assuming he can be designed and balanced in such a way as to force enemies to prioritize damaging him first over his teammates, he would still be doing his job. I will say though that having an ability like this would pretty much necessitate line of sight in order to not be OP, and the actual amount of shields provided to each teammate is something that would have to be tested in order to find a balanced number. But another possible aspect of this ability, just to suggest some alternatives, would be that the amount of shields provided actually increases the more shielded targets take damage. Therefore, if the enemy wants to pick off a key target like your Zenyatta, they may fairly easily still be able to do so, but then they're faced with everyone else on your team having an additional 100 or more shield health for the rest of the engagement. In essence, this would kind of be like a main tank version of Zarya, where instead of using enemy fire to increase the amount of damage you deal, it increases the amount of protection you can provide your team. And again, I'm not saying this idea is perfect, as it clearly has a lot of aspects which would need to be very carefully balanced, but overall, it's something that's rather unique and could possibly be an effective way to function as a main tank tank without needing to use a traditional barrier. His personal health pool would be another important thing to consider, as his whole kit would kind of fall apart if he's too weak on his own to even take the damage he's aggroing onto himself. Looking back at his character, another thing to point out about Sanjay is the fact that he seems to be someone who primarily operates in the background, yet still has a large impact on things. We see this most clearly in the Symmetra comic, where he isn't even physically present in Rio de Janeiro, and yet somehow manages to destroy an entire building after Symmetra fails to find any dirt on their competitor. This is even conveyed in his 2 other appearances, where he's seen just sitting in the background and has a very unassuming demeanor overall. This is not a man who stands front and center of anything, but certainly reaps the rewards and has the power of someone with a lot of control. This fits perfectly with my proposed idea of vicarious shielding, as he wouldn't necessarily be standing in front of his team like a conventional main tank, but could still offer a similar form of protective utility. Furthermore, assuming he has this shield generator on his own body, he'd need an adequate suit to accommodate it. Oh yeah, that'll work. Also, all that shielding must take a lot of energy. He'll need a substantial power source. Maybe a nuclear warhead? I wonder if some of Talon's friends helped him out with that one. What I'm getting at here is that looking at all the current clues and teasers we have that could possibly be pointing at Hero 29, Sanjay's a darn good candidate. Furthermore, given the game's current need for a new main tank, once again he could fit this role, even if his abilities are completely different from my proposed shield generator. That's why, out of the known characters who could be future heroes, Sanjay is currently my #1 pick for Hero 29. This could change as more clues come out, but for now, everything seems to just be right for his arrival. As I'm sure you've noticed, I haven't really touched on his ultimate ability or even his primary weapon. I suspect both of these, as well as whatever other abilities he might have, will be oriented around his shield generator, which would be the most basic and defining part of his kit. Considering that most tank ults utilize CC or area denial, maybe this is where physical hardlight barriers would somehow come into play, either to block off enemies or protect his team. Regardless, there's still plenty of room to discuss Sanjay and his possible kit, which is why I want to hear your ideas down in the comments below. Do you think he'll be Hero 29? And if so, what kind of abilities do you expect him to have? Feel free to check out any of my other new hero concept videos, such as my one discussing the Junker Queen, which I'll have linked in the cards on screen. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video and share it with a friend if you really liked it. Subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and hit the bell to keep up with all my future Overwatch content. This is Master Ian Gamer signing off, and until next time, have a great day.